Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the SACIA webinar. We're going to be talking about back to work guidelines for the events industry. Over the last couple of weeks, SACIA's Event Safety Council has been working very hard to develop back to work guidelines. We've been working with a number of really smart people who have a lot of experience in the events industry. Some of them are joining us in the studio today. And perhaps a good place to start, MGG for hosting us in their studio. Others are going to be joining us remotely, but everybody that is going to be joining us has something meaningful to say. The structure of the webinar, we're going to be talking about the back to work guidelines. They are available in the handout section of this webinar. So if you go down to the handout section, you will be able to download all of the documentation. So we're going to be talking to you for about 40 minutes. During that time, there's an opportunity for you to ask questions using the questions on the screen. And what we'll try to do is to use the last 20 minutes of the webinar to respond specifically to some of the questions that various people have asked. I'm Kevin Jones. I'm the Executive Director of SACIA. And I'm going to ask the various panel members that we have with us right now to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their contribution towards the development of these guidelines and why it is important that we've put these guidelines together. So perhaps, Phil, if I can start with you.
Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, Phil Prinsloo from A Year to Events, specializing in environmental health and safety in the events industry. My main focus was to be part of this journey as we start the conversation with the decision makers in government, so we can start talking about getting back to events as soon as we can, but obviously wanting to balance that with practical solutions and legal responsibilities. Thanks, Kev.
Yep, great. And Sharif?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sharif Baker. I'm the current sitting chairperson for the Technical Production Services Association of South Africa, that's the TPSA, as well as the current sitting chair for SACIA. My involvement here with the rest of the team is to get busy with back to work guidelines with opening our industry. And for my specific component was around event organizers, the event, and the technical components that go with it. So that's my contribution, and we're looking forward to unpacking it here with you today so we can move swiftly along in ensuring we can open up our industry sooner rather than later.
Very nice. And Rentia, let's go over to you.
Hi, g'day. I'm Rentia du Plessis. I work for MGG Productions. I helped with the risk assessment as well as the PPE side, wearing masks and gloves because we all want to get back to work as soon as possible in the events industry.
Yes, very nice. And then Mike Lord, who's chaired the Event Safety Council and been the driver behind this initiative. Mike, perhaps you can just, I've just introduced you, but perhaps you can introduce yourself as well.
So Mike Lord from Alliance Safety Management. I'm the interim chair of the Event Safety Council. The Event Safety Council has kind of been born out of an initiative out of America called the Event Safety Alliance. And with working with the Event Safety Alliance, we've created a council within the South African environment and also with your makings in Africa in driving event safety across the continent. We've taken this opportunity to delve into why guidelines are important around COVID-19 and why we need to reopen. The events industry came to a grinding halt in March once lockdown happened. The supply chain has completely dried up, and we have to find ways to get back to work. We have to find reasonably practicable solutions to be able to gather and get together and organized events.
So thanks very much, Mike. Phil, maybe you can just give us some insight. Mike just said that the events industry has shut down since the introduction of the COVID-19 measures. Just give us an indication of quite how measures have impacted the industry.
Given on the 26th of March, we were in the fortunate position of doing an event on the 25th of March.
Yep.
On the 26th of March, events were first out. On the lockdown of level 5, all mass gatherings were stopped immediately. And that in the risk categorization level 1. The position where legally we're allowed to gather mass gatherings or events as we know it has come to a complete stop.
And Sharif, perhaps you could just jump in and give us some insight. What does this mean to the events industry and the people working in it?
Well, Kevin, what it means for us is an absolute deadlock. Once the president announced that the Gathering Act was in place, every event was shut down. It impacted, yes, companies. Yes, it impacted the economy. Personally, it impacted our freelancers, our individual technicians, very, very harshly, because majority of our industry is run by freelance technicians, and it's hit us extremely, extremely hard. This is the reason we all decided to get together and trying to put something in writing that we can present to make sure our industry can be boosted back to some form of normality.
And Mike, what are the biggest challenges that we face as an industry as we prepare to go back to work? What are the biggest challenges that we face? There's been conversations about churches being allowed to reopen with 50 congregants. What is it that's unique about the events industry that doesn't allow us to take those back to prayer protocols and bring them into the events industry?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is, events gathers people. So that brings people together, and public safety, which has always been a keystone of our industry, is being impacted by COVID-19. The beauty about the events industry is we are extremely rigorous in our self-regulation. So as much as it's a challenge in that gathering people provides ability for transmission of COVID-19, we believe that there are structures and systems that we can put together that are existing, that are currently being put in place, that allows us to start with small meetings, small gatherings, to eventually grow into something that we saw this weekend in New Zealand. And we have to have a stepped approach to that. We all understand that. I think the events industry worldwide recognizes the impact that we have, but we also realize that we are an organized environment. We are self-regulated. We are also regulated by government, by local authorities. So it's not just an environment that's a free-for-all. There are systems that exist, that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I think, we're ready to talk to government about finding ways to reopen this industry. We've set down some guidelines that we think are reasonably practicable to do that. We've developed it based on the World Health Organization around their 5 tiers in risk levels. And we even believe right now we're in a position to start reopening the events industry on a small basis, trialing the systems that we've suggested, to the point that we can then start engaging with bigger crowds coming together.
And Rachel, what does it mean to the production companies that are active in this space? I'm sure that they're kind of gagging to get back to work.
Yes, we all really want to go back to work. We want to do it safely, though. Follow the rules, regulations, that you're not the first company that caused COVID-19 breakout, because that will cause the whole company to close down again, as well as events if we do it wrong. So you really want to focus on the point that's still doing this safe. And yes, it's a lot of pages to read, but it's worth it, because if we do this correctly, we can keep on going with any pandemic again that's coming up.
Okay. There is existing legislation and regulations and guidelines and standards that we apply in the events industry that ensure that we are acting responsibly and acting safely. So can you give us an insight into some of the regulations that exist in this industry, and how have those been built into the guidelines that we've published through SACIA?
Yeah, so in order to do an event in South Africa, with large numbers, we have the South African Recreational and Events Act, SACIA, that determines what is required in order to host an event. It is managed provincially and managed by the local authorities. So we already have structures in place that manages general day-to-day safety. What we need to understand is COVID-19 is one more step in health and safety management at an event. We have existing legislation that governs the way events are managed. So what we've done with the guidelines is we've referenced not only the Department of Employment and Labour requirements in making the workplace safe, but we've then taken that into SACIA and determined what systems are already in place that can help us manage the implementation of going back to work safely in the events industry.
So my thinking, of course, is that in order for this to work effectively, we need the support of government and various regulatory bodies. I'm trying desperately at the moment to activate the link through to Tibor Zana from the Department of Employment and Labour, and Tibor's camera doesn't seem to want to turn on. So Tibor, you should be able to hear me, but you are muted at the moment. Perhaps you could join us.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. Absolutely. Is your camera on? I can't turn it on from my side.
You know, this is a new platform that I'm engaging in, so I have to learn what this one's about.
Okay, that's fine. Well, we can hear you loud and clear. So perhaps you could just give us some insight into the guidelines that we've put together, and more importantly, if you could just give us some insight into how these fit into the regulatory environment that exists in South Africa. What's the next step for us?
Well, very simply, as you and I have been discussing over time, Kevin, the issue is that we obviously look to the various sectors to assist with drafting something that could fit into the directions as it is now. So the first direction that appeared on the 29th of April has now been superseded by the direction that has come out, the second one, on the 4th of June. Now, any guideline must be specialized in terms of the sector that it is going to operate in, if I can use that terminology. So what you're looking at is something that is better than the current direction and is very specific. So for example, and here's a very simple example, a cloth mask might suffice in an office administrative environment, but it definitely won't suffice in a chemical environment. It also won't suffice in an environment which is very wet, for example. So you're looking at what is it that is specialized within your sector and what can be done that will align your sector to what is currently in the directions and also make it a lot better. Now, one of the big problems that we have with the legislation in general, and something that we are struggling with in terms of, and I say struggling because our enforcement component is the last area that we want to resort to. Our first one is always that we want to take people along with us, and therefore we engage with them in this sort of environment that we are busy with now. So what it simply means is, when I look at your environment, yours specifically, who is going to be responsible for making sure that whatever you put in place is in fact adhered to? And that is the biggest problem with legislation in general. Our compliance rate is 55%, but I'll state at the same time, we do not hesitate to recommend prosecutions against employers across the board wherever it is required, where employers fail to comply with legislation. And this is a problem because it's the last of our actual model that we have, where how it works is there are three components to our model as inspectors. The first one is the advocacy component, where we raise awareness, make people aware of legislation in general and what they're required to do. The second part, and I'm simplifying it, is the monitoring component of the inspections. We go out and see if employers are complying. Now, there's a requirement on both the employer as well as the employee and contractors in general, and then our legislation also can apply to people, and that is general public who may be exposed to activities of an employer and the employees, if you like. So if I look at your industry, who are we going to hold accountable if things do go wrong? And obviously, if they do go wrong, and you'll remember that there have been various events where there have been accidents that took place. The last one was not too long ago, where a person fell several meters from the roof level of some other stadium. Now, in that instance, we have to delve very deep to try and get to the bottom of who can be held accountable under those circumstances. And while your industry is doing what it is required to do, I am faced with a similar problem that we try and work with an all-inclusive sector and not a component or components within the various sectors. So I'm aware of the dynamics of your industry, but I'd also like to know that when, if this document does go forward to NEDLAG, and everyone knows what the purpose of NEDLAG is. It is a body that is comprised of organized labor, organized business, various government departments, and then there's a community component as well. Now, these different role players, if they give the okay to whatever is being put in front of them, and if you look at the back of the direction, it's a requirement that it goes to them. If they approve it, then that thing will then go ahead, and basically the inspectors will be required to look at enforcing that, if you like. Now, NEDLAG, as I indicated to you the other day, they can accept it, they can reject it, they can make changes to it. So it all depends what they decide to do with the document. It's not up to me, although I sign off on the document for publication. I will be dependent on them to approve the final document for publication. Now, if it goes to them, yourself or whoever you nominate will be able to interact with NEDLAG on the document to give the background and everything else that is required. I would like to know, though, that the document is going to be an all-inclusive and not something that is going to be run where not all your industry members are in fact playing a role in this thing, because once it becomes legislation, everyone will be. You see, something that happened is that I don't want a legal challenge from any one of your parties that might not be privy to this document. So that is something that you and I haven't taken offline, but it's something that we need to discuss nonetheless. So I've given you an overview, the crux of the direction of the three parties, employee, and members of the public. That is what the document covers. If you've sufficiently covered it and you give the inspector sufficient teeth to be able to administer the document, then NEDLAG shouldn't have too much of a problem with the document itself. So those are just some of the elements without belaboring the issue. Given that it's difficult that you can't see me either, let me put that on the table and then answer any question that you have. Thank you, Kevin.
That's fine. So actually, we have a screen screenshot that perhaps, Johan, if you could put it up onto the broadcast. One of the key things that we've done in developing these guidelines is that we've worked very closely with all sorts of other associations active in the event space. Some of the bigger ones, AXO, the African Association for Exhibition Organizers, the Event Greening Forum, SITE, EXA, SACIA. So this has really been a collaborative effort in terms of putting it together. And Glenton, I'm going to invite you to join us now. Glenton de Kock is the Executive Director of SACIA, the South African Association for the Conference Industry. Glenton, you're muted at the moment, and I'm also not able to.
Kevin, can you hear me?
Webcam. Yes, absolutely. So maybe you can just give us some insight into the events industry and the events council and the interaction, the relationship between all of these various associations that have participated in this process.
Yeah, Kevin, and good morning. Thanks for the opportunity. So just leading from I think from the previous speaker, the clarity that we had from the onset, and I think everybody is aware of the fact that we've shut down as a sector. What that then did, and as you rightfully put up onto the screen, was get all the associations together, effectively under the umbrella of the SA Events Council. And over the last, let's say, months now, because it's more than weeks, months, we've been looking at how best do we engage with government, and more importantly, how do we inform government to an extent that says the sector, one, has always been regulated, and second, we have and are in the position to self-regulate at the same time. In doing that, the clarity that we have now is, as we've seen with level 3, in relaxing some of the economic activities as such, we are in a position with these guidelines that has been broadly distributed amongst the associations, amongst the members, and one can look at the number of people that have dialed in today. So the industry, in our view, is ready to operate. We just need to ensure, as per the previous speaker, that we're getting to the right people to make the right decisions timelessly. Because the fear that we all have, and I think it's a general fear across the country, is if our particular sector is delayed in opening, the bloodbath, the blood sort of that is sort of reeling from companies and the losses of jobs will be insurmountable and will take us many, many years to then recover. So as associations, the clarity we've had is that at an advocacy level, when we are speaking to the people that can provide us with decisions, because time is not on our side. Second is that we have a sector across the board within our association member base, have a sector that will be able to self-regulate. And we're really appealing to our member bases across all the associations, even the ones, people that have dialed in that are not members, to ensure that when they look at the guidelines, the guideline is specifically there to assist in ensuring that should something happen, we are able then to manage the fallout from that. Because I think the worst and the fear that we all have as a sector is that we are seen as one of the sectors that can only open at level 0, which effectively means that there must be some sort of fear or some concern within the government decision-making process that views us as an industry at risk. For all intents and purposes, these guidelines, I think, answer not only the current concerns, but I think future concerns in respect that in no other time are we have been able to have done this as a sector to do the following: come together as associations. Second, develop the guidelines, and more importantly, actually inform policy in the future as well. So I think we're on the right track. We're doing the right things. I think the level of frustration, if we're going to feel that, is if we don't get any engagement or feedback immediately from government side. So I think for that purposes, given the opportunity has arisen now that in true essence, all of the associations and the industry has demonstrated what collaboration can actually do for us going forward.
And I think that certainly goes in to answer the issue that Tibor raised. Perhaps, Phil, you could just give me some insight into the kind of organizer or the kind of events, many different kinds of events that exist in the market. But before you answer, I'm going to put a poll up onto the screen. The poll is really just to get an idea of the kind of events that people are involved in. So while people are answering that question, Phil, can you just kind of give us a broad spectrum? What kind of events are we talking about?
So, Kevin, the guidelines and our focus is more on entertainment and, excluding the sports events. The sports bodies belong to the sports department and they started their own journey. So this is for entertainment, exhibitions, so any event that's in that entertainment that brings us together. Conferences, debates, music concerts, anything that has to do with us coming together. That is what the focus is about. General events, all of them.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Justin van Wyk to join us and give us some insight into the application of these guidelines in the music industry. Before I do so, just keeping a note here, at the moment, 42% of participants in this webinar have voted. So I'm going to leave it open for a few more minutes. But Justin, if you're available, I'm going to activate your webcam, and perhaps you can just give us, whilst the poll is running, you can give us some insight into what's happening with the music industry and how these back to work guidelines may assist you.
Kevin, thank you for having me. So we're obviously in a very tough space, the live entertainment industry as a whole. Social distancing isn't possible in our industry. You know, we thrive on having people seated and standing very close to each other. So the foreclosure of our industry has been devastating to everyone that operates in this segment. The guidelines as they stand see us opening up predominantly in the very last two categories of the risk levels, which assumes where we can't do social distancing. We're not going to be able to create a space of a meter or meter and a half with a person next to us. We are able to do things like contact tracing. We are able to implement a lot of the other protocols, and certainly, the organizers that operate in this space, these professional people. These are organized events. We're able to do a lot of things to minimize the risk of transmission, but ultimately, it is amongst the higher risk. So, the guides for us are a step in the right direction. Obviously, we would have wanted a lot more easing of it. We are actively following what's happening all the way from Canada down to New Zealand. As you may have seen, New Zealand's opened up their industry this past weekend with rugby. A lot of the entertainment venues that we've spoken to, the arenas, the theaters, the stadiums, we're all grappling with these restrictions and trying to figure out the timescales to the reopening of the industry. The kind of risks that we take as live entertainment organizers or any sort of live event organizer. There's significant risks that we take in booking, talent and artists to play at these events, and all of the vendors and money that we spend up front. And for us, we want certainty that if we do book an event, say next year, July or the December this year, even, that these events are going to be able to go ahead. What we don't want is we go ahead with our event, we commit substantial amount of money and effort into putting on an event, and then we get upgraded back to level 2, or we don't get permits for the event because of uncertainty around the regulations. So it's a challenging time for us. The people in the industry are hit particularly hard. Entertainment venues, promoters, event organizers, festivals. We're an important part of the social fabric, the cultural landscape of South Africa, and there are hundreds of artists sitting at home today without any form of income. Streaming is, people have tried streaming. Streaming's a great way of staying relevant. It's, unless you're BTS, which just made $21 million this past week live streaming to 750,000 people at $34. It's not a viable revenue stream. It's really challenging to get people to pay for this content, for this live content. So, we want to get back out there. We want to perform to the fans, and we want to get people back in venues.
Justin, if I can just pause you for a second, I want to share the results of the poll that we had. Actually, very interesting to see 68% of our audience involved in events, music, theatre, and public entertainment. So a significant portion of the audience involved in that sector. And then 44% exhibitions, 53% conferences, 44% social events, parties, funerals, weddings, and 25% community events. So a nice mix of people. Tibor, I know that you have to leave quite soon. You have another webinar at 12 o'clock. So before I excuse you, can you just kind of chime in with some closing comments from your side? I know that you were concerned that we had not been as inclusive as we could have been in developing these guidelines, but certainly from what you heard, I would hope that those concerns have been addressed. Tibor? Tibor, you there? No? Glenton, perhaps?
Then I can proceed with that.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yes, Tibor, sorry. I know that you've got a tight schedule, so perhaps you could just share your insights.
Kevin, am I required to respond now? I was speaking a moment ago.
Yeah, yes, sorry, we didn't, you didn't come through. I was just saying, in terms
Yeah.
of the way that we've engaged with various other associations and put this together as a collaborative effort, I suspect that we may meet the requirements that you described earlier.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll move to take the matter up with NEDLAG, but obviously there are other government departments that need to be involved in this, that needs to make the decision around opening up for the events industry. So that will be quite a that will take some work between now and next Monday. So between then and between now and Monday, you and I will engage as I progress on the matter. But thank you to you and the team. I do appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, let's remain positive about the way forward. As difficult as it is, I'm under no illusions. I will see what I can do from my side insofar as it is within my power. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Sounds great. I suppose I have one last question for you, if you don't mind me asking it before you have to leave, and that is around SACIA, because the Events Act actually falls under the kind of the control of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. So when you speak about other government departments, I suppose we're talking about arts and culture, we're talking about Department of Labour, Department of Health, Department of Tourism, many other government parties.
Those are the parties that we'll have to engage in terms of the discussion around the document and obviously opening up the industry. So you're 100% right. And I think those are the names, if you have got contacts in those areas, that you'll have to then share with me. And then we'll take it from there, because the next step after NEDLAG parties have looked at it would be to engage the right people and not people that I think would be appropriate on this matter. So I think post this discussion, at the end of today, you and I can engage again around the appropriate people to be on that particular forum.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. Glenton, I know you've been working quite closely with the Department of Tourism through the Tourism Business, what is it, TBF, SA?
Tourism Business Council for South Africa.
Tourism Business Council, sorry, muffled up. Maybe you can just give us insight into what we've been looking at with the Tourism Business Council.
So with our sort of seat and working the relationship with the TBCSA, we've obviously have, and I think many members on the call have seen the general tourism health and safety protocols. These particular guidelines, with the help of Mike and the rest of the team, were part of those protocols. Because of the chunky nature and the detail that we've gone through, we probably just only got a mention or two in the general tourism protocols. But suffice to say that with the guidelines and with the guidance we've been given by TIBO now, we effectively have got a way forward in respect of getting the sign-offs we require for the guidelines, but more importantly for us to get reactivated sooner than anticipated at present. So I think everybody that needs to be consulted and be engaged with and work towards, I think within the SA Events Council, under the umbrella, and with the work that we've all done collectively, I think we're closer than what we anticipate. But as Tibo said, we need to get to speaking to the right people to get the right decisions made as soon as possible for our sector.
Sounds good. So I'm just going through the questions. Let's see if we can ask a couple of people have commented that the sound is bad. So I'm hoping that's improved. But here's a question from somebody who says, here we are. Can I go back to us? Basically, the question is, when do we think we are going to be able to host events again as per the regulations? So who wants to pick that one up?
Yeah, I think I'd like to see if both Mike and I can jump in here.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I think everybody that is dialed in and tuned in understands the history of our eventing act or system. But just to go back 10 years prior to World Cup, it was more a construction health and safety regulation guideline that was used. Segue into FIFA, then we rallied all together to put a the SACIA Act together, which you just said falls under specifically the Department of Sports and Arts and Culture, and thus hopefully I'm glad Tibor's taking it to NEDLAC, because to date we haven't had the opportunity to engage with Minister Intetra in making sure we can do what we need to do. With regards to opening our event, the minister has, under the SACIA Act, has spoken on numerous occasions with the Sporting Federation, which is SASCOC, and we admire him for that. Thus, we have now stepped up to the game and formed the SA Events Council with all the entities and associations collectively speaking to specific guidelines that speak to
levels. We spoke about them previously, and we think very low risk profile events with limited exposure or low exposure can be held safely and can be done with health and safety of public in mind and workers and so forth. So we have the opinion that under level 3 we can do that. And as we move down the levels, level 2, level 1, we're then able to open up larger audiences where it becomes a little bit more complex to manage. But we believe that we have the wherewithal and the ability and the structures in which to manage it. From a policing and legislation and oversight point of view, and Phil can talk more about this, is we have existing structures. We have South African Police Services requirements in managing events that's in place. We have local authorities that are currently regulating events. To add this to their portfolio with the various departments and local authorities and disaster management centers can be very easily implemented working together. One thing I just want to touch on is that it's been a long time, and probably the last time we as an industry talked together was the FIFA World Cup. That set the benchmark for many major events post the World Cup. And 10 years on, we can be very proud about what we hosted, and I don't need to name any of those. And we've seen this industry come together, talking together. The South African Events Council is very much on one page in working together to make this happen. And we are very excited about the prospects and what this brings to the table.
So somebody else here has asked a question. Can someone please speak to how to stop companies exploiting crews? I'm not sure that's necessarily related to event safety, but perhaps one of the things that we could talk about is the diversity of individuals that work in an event environment, because the vast majority of people come in as freelancers. Sharif, do you want to pick up on that one?
Yeah, obviously we're not going to touch on specifics, but when it comes to the Event Safety Council, and like Mike has said, these guidelines now is the spine. It's the foundation of what is yet to come moving forward, current and post COVID-19. Utilizing what the SACIA Act has already, but combined with the new guidelines now will assist moving forward what happens to the freelance community, the regulations that we put in force via the event organizer, via the compliance officer, the safety officers at each event, which Phil can segue into shortly, is what's going to define what happens to our industry moving forward, especially as a freelancer, as a technician, as an individual in our industry. So this is the foundation of our new future moving forward.
So here's another question. On the whole, thank you says one of our delegates, for a thorough document. If there is one aspect that is hugely problematic, it is the criteria used to determine the risk of exposure profile of an event is the number of attendees, not the duration of the event, the type of event, the audience profile, etc. In this document, a group of 5,000 recovered and possibly immune people meeting for 30 minutes in a field has the maximum risk profile way higher than 50 elderly people meeting for 2 days in a basement. So Mike, perhaps you can talk about the criteria that we looked at when we tried to determine the risk profile of an event.
Yeah, the criteria is a very difficult, emotive, subjective opinion. It has to be based on a risk profile. Every risk, and rightly so, 300 people can easily be a high risk depending on the factors that fall into that. You know, the World Health Organization has a risk assessment that talks into how to categorize that. We fell short of not adding that to the guidelines. And the reason being is that we want to give freedom to the event organizer to determine their risk profile depending on their venue, where they are, what type of environment. We don't want to dictate what those terms are. We do feel that to open under level 3, we have to cap the capacity. We've got to get to work, and there's no point in trying to put 5,000 people together in an environment that will frankly not be safe right now. But we feel that over a short period of time, whether it's 2 to 6 months or further, that we can then look at models that work worldwide and adopt those locally. I think, you know, your risk assessment will determine your risk profile. And event organizers are professionals. They do this for a living. They are easily able to understand the risk profiles the event brings and the various technicalities, whether it be food, toilets, queuing systems, point of sale issues. We've touched them within the guidelines and put in recommendations and processes to help us manage, you know, how do we do a 1,000 square meter exhibition? How do we do an exhibition that has 10,000 people separated over time slots? There are various mechanisms and ingenuity that will come into the way we do business going forward. And I don't think the guidelines are there to stop that. So I think to get us open, to get us into an environment where we can host events, we feel that a capacity event of under 300 with very tough controls or rigorous controls allows us to be open under level 3 lockdown.
Kevin, can I just jump in and say,
Yep.
This is new to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
That risk assessment is being done by venues, but then we've got this gap between the local authorities. How do approved layout plans look, seating plans look, you know, for social distancing and seating and that type of thing? The police have to only focus on the regulations that are not in their hands yet. So this is a journey. We're going to have to find our way in all this. NEDLAC is fantastic. The departments are fantastic, but we need to bring all of those people together, local councils, police, so that we're all on the same page. It's senseless to have a fantastic plan that we all believe in with a risk assessment, but it is not supported by, for instance, the local councils, event safety department. So we'll have to bring all of these things together very quickly.
And I'd like to echo on that, riding on the back of what Phil is saying. The beauty of the Event Safety Council back to work guidelines runs concurrently with the Event Safety Alliance of America and Europe, as Mike has justifiably said. So this is a document that can be used nationally throughout South Africa. It can go through all the different ESPC venues, all the jocks, all the police stations, all the municipalities. And if it is unified, then unity is standard in everything that we do, just not just from an event or an event organized, but from police, Metro Police, JMPD, ER24, all the medical fraternities. If we speak with one voice, with what we've suggested in these guidelines, then it should be made easy, exactly with what Phil has said.
Okay, so another of the questions that's come up, with churches being open and funerals being open, what is stopping conferences from happening when we are probably able to social distance and police far better than takes place in a church or funeral? Who wants to pick up on that one? Mike?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I think you know, events, recreational events, business tourism events can be held right now. And that's the purpose of the guidelines, is to set benchmarks that we as an industry believe, A, we can do, and B, are safe. They're preventative and proactive, which talks right into the occupational health and safety requirements. It talks into the requirements of SACIA. So yes, we can host those events. We don't think something over 300 people right now, within the next month is doable. We think we need to go slowly, but we do think within a period of 2 to 3 months, we will be able to host 2,000 people in a room. We will be able to do processes that allows us to bring people together. So yes, we do believe. We're not a church. We're not an aircraft where you can put 300 people in. We are an organized event. We know who our delegates are. We know who we can invite, whether it be an exhibition, whether it be a conference, whether it be a corporate launch. Corporates want abilities to come together and create avenues of gathering. And we as an industry have helped write these guidelines. And I say the industry, the events industry, because we're working together to find ways that are acceptably practical in opening the industry.
Mike, can I just jump in? Just to make it very clear, at the moment, 50 people with temporary structure that has to do all the local health and safety applications will not pass that test because, we're still under these very strict regulations of level 3. So please, everybody viewing, it's not to say that we can start launching all the applications tomorrow. We need to get some of these approvals and support from NEDLAC and the guys first.
But
just to make it clear.
this is a guideline.
Correct.
And this is a guideline for our industry and for the owner of the current SACIA Act, which is the Department of Sports and Arts and Culture, to take it with both hands and run with it, as well as T-Board taking it to NEDLAC. The quicker we can get these ratified, the quicker we can get back to work.
Correct.
We can't get back to work right now. These guidelines have been put together by everybody in the industry to say this is how it can work. And the beauty of it is these guidelines show and depict specifically what we're going to do from the time you get out of your car to go conference, event, funeral, wedding, everything is there specifically. And again, once the compliance officer and the event organizer complies with this and regulates it, we have a winning solution.
But Mike, we want to start tomorrow.
Okay, so we're down to the last 10 minutes. We have a couple more questions that I'd like to encourage people to send in. None that have come in recently, so perhaps I can put up another poll just to see if we can gather some information from various people.
Kev, could you respond to the printed mail we got from
Yes,
Mark?
yes, the one from Mark Ransom.
Mark
yeah,
Ransom.
Why don't you talk about that?
Mark, thank you very much. Had a long discussion, a few of us outside. Some concerns about that social distancing in the application of seating. Mark, this is a moving document. It is a moving thing. So Mike was just saying at 50 people, a checkerboard distribution of seating might be acceptable because that's not going to interfere with evacuation. Obviously, in your situation with fixed seatings, blocking of seats and not removing seats. So we'll have to apply that planning or protocols based on the situation that we have. So thank you very much for your questions. There are one or two things that we've taken up. So thanks, Mark. It's all about the application. Is it a bubble? It is a square. It will have to depend on the situation that we find ourselves in and the venue.
But I think it goes also further, and I like to over and above that, what we were trying to do now and what you're trying to do with this poll, it goes beyond the SA Events Council and the associates with it. It goes to everybody in our industry pooling together with some type of poll or document that can be presented to SACIA or the Events Council, that when we present to NEDLAC, we are unified. And it's something that I personally have been pushing and promoting from day one. I love the African word Ubuntu, and I'd like it to stay, and I'd like it to be part and the core of what we're trying to do. And if we all stand together, this document can see the light of day at NEDLAC and the Department of Sports and Arts and Culture, Department of Labor, Department of Health, and we can get back to work. So we need to pull together, all of us together, not just the people that form the event council.
Okay, so no other questions coming in at the moment. We're moving into the last 10 minutes. Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, if I can just jump on what Justin and Glenton have said from a SA Event Council perspective and the broader aspect of putting on events. I think the most critical thing in everything when writing guidelines, and the reason why the Occupational Health and Safety Act is so broad in its interpretation is it's about looking each sector needing to look after themselves. So, we've inherited the SACIA Act, And part of the South African Sports and Recreational Act is about governing health and safety in the workplace. And that workplace is the event site. So, we have to work together in collaboratively. This is not about the event organizer taking the load or the financial burden or the operational burden. It's about the venue, the stakeholders, the role players, the sponsors that we need to be able to make things happen. It's about all those role players coming together and then forming that plan that talks to this. The idea with the guidelines is to ensure that the current legislation, the current thinking, the current best practices apply, that we understand what those are. For us, whether we face terrorism, crime, and now this pandemic, it's one more item we need to worry about in the events industry. And we're very good at applying our minds and putting in systems that talks to that. So, the question of how far is social distancing, what is that? I think that can be easily interpreted. And what's really important here is putting together our strategy on how we will run our event and how we intend doing that. And the beauty about events is it's all about being, innovative. And our clients and the people that are putting on events need ability to be innovative, and the guidelines will help them do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had some questions that have come in. Samira Pillay has raised her hand in order to ask a question. So Samira, I have unmuted you, and if you want to, no, here you go. If you want to ask your question, you're able to go ahead. No? Okay. If anybody's putting their hand up to ask a question, please be prepared to ask the question. To ask the question. Not there. Okay. Phil, do you want to kind of add some closing comments?
Yeah, Kevin, just for all of us, through Mike and through all of us around the table, we've forwarded our event safety guidelines to the World Health Organization, the National Department of Communicable Diseases, for input, for support, and for auditing this document to make sure that we are talking a lot of sense. So we are not trying to be in a bubble. As we said from the beginning, this is consultative. It is an ongoing document, and we will listen to everybody so that we can make this work for all of us. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Somebody here, somebody else raised their hand? No, they've dropped it again. Just whizzing through here. We are Luke Berger. I hope you're ready to ask your question. I've unmuted you. Please go ahead and ask your question.
We can hear you, Luke.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, go for it.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. Sorry, my connection broke up a few times, so I missed some of the communication with regards to this proposed act. Where are we able to view this, just to also get understanding if we ourselves are similarly aligned, to this ongoing process?
Luke, are you talking about the guidelines?
Yeah, correct.
If you go to the handouts section of this webinar, you can
Okay.
download them from the handouts section of the webinar. Alternatively,
Okay.
if you go to the social media sites managed by SACIA or any of our special interest groups, or EXA or SACI, or any of the associations, they all have it available as a download from their social media sites.
Okay, I'll have a look there. I appreciate it.
But if you just scroll down, look under handouts. It
Yes.
says handouts 1 of 5. That's where you can download it right now. Okay, so thanks very much to Luke for his question. I'm going to take one from Lo Pretorius. So Lo, I have unmuted your microphone. Is your question there? Lo Pretorius? Come Lo. Okay. Sorry, if you've raised your hand, I'll give you an opportunity to ask a question, but you have to be ready to ask it. Lenita, is it? Lenita McInnes Grasmuck. That's an interesting name. Again, your microphone is unmuted. You're self-muted. Have you got a question that you want to ask? No? Nothing. Okay. I think we're into the last couple of minutes. Phil, do you want to wrap? Let's just go quick.
No, sir, I'm done.
Sharif?
I've spoken.
I think it is incumbent on everybody, and I know it's a long document, but is to read every single line in this guideline, especially if you're an event organizer. It is imperative that you understand what this council has tried to do for us collectively, especially the work that Brinty has put in with regards to risk assessment, with specific to eventing and not just construction. I think it's imperative that everybody reads it, and if there are any comments, please, we feel free to ask and submit, and because it is a living, breathing document, and I'm pretty sure any of us sitting around the table, including the Event Safety Council Chair Mike, will be more than willing to assist and help in adjusting and changing it. But we've got a document to work with now. Let's make it work for us.
Renthia?
I just wanted to say, guys, we all together in this. As long as we all work together, this can work. If one of us do not agree and not going to bring their side, this is not going to work overall. So if we all can stand together, united, and do this together, I'm sure we can reopen the industry.
And Mike, perhaps you'd like to wrap up for all of us.
Yeah, I think Wrench is onto a point, and as we've said before, this is a collaborative effort. We have associations for a reason. There's a reason why they exist. The fact that we've now come together under the SA Event Council and we're talking about how to take this industry forward is critical. If you're not part of an association, become a part of an association. Have a voice within those associations to drive what we're trying to do together. We have to stand forward as a united industry. We're far too fragmented in the past. The World Cup showed what it could be like for us to come together, and COVID-19 is again one more opportunity to show that what we can do as an industry. The guidelines aren't there to answer every single question. It's impossible to do so. Things are it's extremely fluid, but we feel that the guidelines gives us a base from which to talk to government, to talk to about how we do this. And I think that's what's important about the whole process.
Okay. So thank you very much to all of our panelists. Thank you once again to MGG for hosting us in their studio. Thank you to all of the delegates. At the moment, just under 400. So absolutely great turnout. Please download the document. Please read and please provide input so that we can take things forward through to government and other regulatory bodies. So thank you very much to everybody. Appreciate your input.